Most people watching this have a memory of being told to put the phone down, and most of them rolled their eyes. Our parents were not scientists. They had not read a single study on behavioral addiction, dopamine loops, or the psychological architecture baked into the apps we're glued to now. They were just people watching something happen to the kids they loved, something they couldn't name but could feel. Here's what they were watching: a generation of men falling in love with women they will never meet, women building their entire sense of self around lifestyles they have never lived and cannot afford. Everyone, on every platform, in every country, across every demographic, chasing a version of life that only exists on a screen, not building the one they have, chasing someone else's. And the most disturbing part of this investigation is not what the phone did to this generation. It's that our parents saw it happening before the researchers could even name it. No data, no studies, no peer review. They just watched us pick it up one day and noticed we were no longer ourselves. Good evening. Coming to you from my library, where tonight the case file is about the most dangerous object in human history. Despite my cryptic introduction, the phone is not the problem. Every video about this topic says the phone is the problem, and every video about this topic is wrong about that specific thing. The phone is a delivery mechanism. What matters is what it was built to deliver, and what the people who built it knew they were delivering while they were building it. In the 1950s, a psychologist named B.F. Skinner discovered something about behavior that changed how power operates in the modern world. Though nobody described it that way at the time, Skinner found that unpredictable rewards produced more compulsive behavior than consistent ones. A pigeon that receives a food pellet every time it pecks at a lever eventually stops pecking when it's not hungry. But a pigeon that receives a pellet sometimes randomly without pattern pecks the lever compulsively, indefinitely, even when it's not hungry, even when nothing is coming. The not knowing is the mechanism. The maybe is the addiction. The like button delivers validation unpredictably. The notification arrives randomly. The comment that makes you feel seen comes at intervals nobody can anticipate. That is not an accident by design. In 2017, Sean Parker, Facebook's first president, said publicly that the platform was built to exploit a vulnerability in human psychology. He used those words: exploit vulnerability. Not a theory, not a leak, a confession delivered in an interview that is still available online.
Ha! Is it really that easy? Controlling mortals is just pulling a few invisible strings. Drip a little chemical in the brain here, tickle a few neurons there, and suddenly everybody dancing to the Pied Piper.
Well, that is one way to put it.
See, that is why me is immune, man. Miss Call is empty. Wait, that did not come out right.
Sean Parker's comments should have produced outrage, but all it produced was a news cycle and then nothing. The Greeks had a story about this before psychology had a name for it. Tantalus was condemned to stand for eternity in a pool of water beneath trees heavy with fruit. Every time he reached upward, the branches lifted just out of range. Every time he bent down to drink the water, it receded. He could see everything he wanted, but he can never have it. The punishment was not the denial. The punishment was the permanent visibility of the thing being denied. The social media feed is Tantalus's pool. The content is the fruit. And unlike Tantalus, nobody sentenced us to it. You downloaded it voluntarily, and you open it again every time the water recedes. But the slot machine architecture only explains why people cannot put it down. It says nothing about what the phone is showing people that makes them not want to. And that is the part that should concern you significantly more. In 1954, a psychologist named Leon Festinger published a theory that explains more about the current mental health crisis than almost anything written since: social comparison theory, the observation that humans have a fundamental drive to evaluate themselves by measuring against others. Festinger's first hypothesis stated it plainly:
there exists in the human organism a drive to evaluate its opinions and abilities, and in the absence of objective measures, people use other people to do it.
What Festinger could not have anticipated was the scale at which that drive would eventually operate. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar established that the human brain evolved to maintain stable social relationships with approximately 150 people, the size of a small community, where every comparison was based on someone real, someone local, someone operating under the same constraints as you. Social media did not break either of those findings. It turned them against the people they were meant to describe.
Oh, we don't need all that. We don't need the research to know the phone took the village idiot and made him compete with the global champion.
Alright, then what do you think it is?
Before you compared yourself to Kevin down the street, Kevin had a nicer lawn, maybe a better haircut, maybe one good shirt. Now, you see another village idiot somewhere else in the world living like a king. And suddenly you think, wait, maybe I could do that too. Except everybody is thinking the same thing. That is the trick, Winston. The phone did not make everybody special. It made everybody think special was normal.
I suppose that is fair. Men are now measuring themselves against the most jacked, most successful, most socially dominant men on the planet. And those men aren't framed as rare exceptions. They're presented as the baseline, the average, the guy you were supposed to be by now. Women are measuring themselves against the most beautiful, most put together, most emotionally unbothered boss girls on the planet. And those women aren't presented as the product of a full production team with lighting rigs and 3 hours of editing. They're presented as what a random Wednesday morning will look like. Neither of those things is the baseline. There's an anime called Oshinoko that examines this from the inside with more accuracy than most academic papers can ever. It follows the idol industry, the machine beneath the personas that audiences fall in love with, and tracks that gap between the person fans think they know and the person who actually exists. The idol isn't selling talent or beauty. She is selling the feeling that you know her, that you are close to her, that she is yours in some small way. She is not. She never was. The version of her was built in a room with a marketing strategy and a content calendar. But the feeling is real, and that feeling is the part that matters. Because the brain does not fall for a person. It falls for a feeling. And once the feeling is there, it does not care whether the source is genuine. That sounds like a specific problem with the idol industry in Japan or Korea. It is not. It is the exact same thing happening on every Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube account with a large following right now. The influencer is the idol. The follower is the fan. And the gap between the person on screen and the person behind it is identical. The only difference is the aesthetic.
Great Merlin's mutton chops. Oshinoko! That show left a pit in my non-existent stomach. But that story understood something, Winston. People don't fall in love with a person on the screen. They fall in love with the feeling the screen gives them.
And here's the thing social comparison theory alone can't explain. If the content consistently makes people feel inadequate, why does the consumption keep going up? Why would anyone voluntarily return to something that reliably makes them feel worse about their own life? That question has an answer, and it's more uncomfortable than the question itself. In 1956, Donald Horton and Richard Wohl coined the term parasocial relationship to describe something they noticed in early radio audiences. People forming genuine emotional bonds with media personalities who didn't know they existed. Real grief when the host retired. Real loyalty to a voice through a speaker. They were puzzled by it, but they should have been terrified by it. Because what they stumbled onto wasn't a quirk of devoted fans. It was the engine that would eventually power the entire economy. The influencer is not selling content. Content is a delivery mechanism. What's actually being sold is the feeling of a relationship with someone who has been specifically engineered to feel like a friend. The algorithm knows which moments of vulnerability generate the most engagement. It knows that strategic imperfection, the raw, honest post, the no makeup Tuesday, the crying in the car video, produces more emotional investment than polished perfection ever could. And the audience knows this somewhere, and they feel it anyways. Because the nervous system doesn't fact-check feelings, it just responds to them. In 2020, Netflix released a show called Emily in Paris. It follows an American woman living a life in Paris that no actual person in Paris lives. The perfect apartment, the effortless wardrobe, the charmed social life, the city itself as a backdrop that exists purely to flatter her. Critics called it a fantasy. Audiences called it aspirational. It became one of the most watched shows on the platform. and something specific happened after it aired. Searches for Paris travel spiked. French fashion searches spiked. The specific aesthetic the show presented, the barrette, the baguette, the sun-drenched cafe, started appearing across Instagram and TikTok feeds worldwide as women built their identities around a version of a life the show had sold them. A version of a life that doesn't exist. Not in Paris, not anywhere. The show didn't create the hunger, it just gave the hunger a new address. Women were already consuming lifestyle content that presented an unattainable aesthetic as the baseline of what a good life looks like. Emily in Paris was the same mechanism running on a bigger budget with a better soundtrack. The real apartment doesn't have those windows. The real wardrobe isn't gifted. The real life in Paris involves rent, a Metro card, a job that doesn't pause for a perfectly lit croissant moment, and that gap between what the screen delivered and what life actually provides. It doesn't register as a flaw on the screen, it just registers as a flaw in the life.
Oh, Winston, they fell for the same hook, just different bait. One person sees Emily in Paris and thinks, ah yes, my true life is waiting in a cafe with perfect hair and a little hat. Another sees Passport Bro content and thinks, ah yes, my true life is waiting overseas with a submissive wife and a mango smoothie. Then the men arrive and realize the women don't want them. And the women arrive in Paris and realize the city smells like hot piss and broken dreams. Same fantasy, Winston. Social media just changed the costume.
That's right, Toombs. Our parents didn't know about Festinger and Horton and Wold. They couldn't name any of this. They just noticed we were different when we put the phones down. More present, more like ourselves. And they were right, not because they understood the mechanism, but because they could see the person it was producing. The question this investigation can't fully answer isn't whether the phone damaged this generation. The people who built these platforms have already answered that themselves. The real question is whether a generation that grew up inside the construction can choose to step outside of it. Whether the discomfort of that, of measuring your real life against your actual life instead of someone else's highlight reel, is something people are still willing to feel. Or whether the constructed world has simply become more comfortable than the real one. But these are just my observations. If this case file earned your attention, feel free to leave a like. Consider subscribing and tell me what you observed in the comments below. We would also like to announce that the Eves Manor Discord is now open to guests. The channel is still small and so is the community, but that is exactly why we wanted to start it now. And if you are interested in being part of that smaller community, a place where you can be acknowledged rather than drowned out by a sea of others, where you can suggest future case files and help shape what the library becomes next, the Discord link is in the description. And until we meet again, my library will remain open.